The phone finally rang at 8:47 in the morning. I was already wide awake, fully dressed, and my eyes were locked on the screen. A professional voice stated, "Mr. Wyatt, we've completed the mortgage transfer you requested. The funds will be available within the hour." I offered no response, my gaze fixed on the window. The sky was a sheet of gray, utterly still and without a breath of wind. "Is there anything else we can assist you with today?" I simply ended the call, and a smile touched my lips for the first time in weeks. I could imagine them still tangled in bed, her soft voice whispering another man's name. The phantom scent of her perfume, now the smell of betrayal, seemed to drift down the hall. Maybe they were in the kitchen now, making breakfast, eggs, and toast, living in their perfect little bubble. They were convinced they had broken me, that I had surrendered and given them everything without a fight. They were so incredibly wrong. Our Sunday dinners were supposed to be a sacred tradition. Her mother served the same lamb roast, the same wine, and shot me the same smug, satisfied looks. But this time, her words were a knife to the heart, twisted deep. "This house belongs to me and my new husband now," she declared. There was no apology, not a moment of doubt, just a voice dripping with poisonous sweetness. It was as if she was handing me an eviction notice and a piece of celebratory cake all at once. I chose not to answer. I didn't need to. The silence that followed was more destructive than any scream I could have mustered. With a casual flick of her wrist, she slid her wedding ring off and placed it beside her wine glass. It was an afterthought, a mere paperweight. I looked at it. The gold was familiar, but now it seemed cheap and tawdry. Her mother gave a slight, approving nod, as if she had been waiting for this final act, a necessary witness to my humiliation. I laid my keys on the table and walked out without a single backward glance. But as I crossed the threshold, I wasn't a shattered man. I was a strategist. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I didn't confront. I observed and I learned. Just 2 nights later, I was logging into the main mortgage account. It was still in my name, still entirely under my control. I pulled up the digital records, every transaction, every statement, every signature. Her name wasn't on a single one. Not legally. She had built her new life on a foundation of lies. She had always lied about her income, about who paid the bills, about what she felt she deserved. Memories of her late nights at work, business trips that never made sense, and hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the room flooded back. My mistake back then was not asking questions. Now, my purpose was to document everything. I submitted the formal request for a full mortgage liquidation. I initiated the transfer of the property deed to a shell account I had quietly established 3 months prior. At the time, it felt like paranoia. Now, I saw it for what it was, pure survival. She was the one who had forged me into this cold, sharp, and dangerous version of myself. Out of curiosity, I found her wedding registry online 2 days later. It was filled with cheap plates, a basic bed frame, an ordinary coffee maker. It was almost laughable. They had no concept of real value, and they certainly had no idea I was watching their every move. The bank's call was the final confirmation. $780,000 had been transferred. The title was cleared. The house was no longer in their possession. Well, the truth was, it never had been. I printed out the final documents, 3 pages that were crisp, legal, and utterly final. I drove back to the house on Thursday afternoon. Their car was parked
in the driveway, and I walked past it without a glance. I knocked once on the door. She opened it, wrapped in a robe, and her smile vanished the instant she saw the folder in my hand. "What is this?" she asked, her voice tight. I simply handed it to her without a word.
She frantically flipped through the pages, and the color drained from her face. This is impossible." My voice was calm, and even as I said, "The house was never yours. It never had your name on it or his." I watched her lips begin to tremble, trying to form excuses she hadn't bothered to prepare. "But you, on Sunday, you just left." I replied, "I wanted to see what you would do when you were certain you had one." I heard footsteps behind her. Him. The new husband. He looked younger than I remembered, with a weak chin and nervous eyes. I turned to leave. "Good luck finding somewhere to sleep tonight," I said, and I walked away. The house sold the very next day. I didn't bother to go back for a final look. Instead, I watched from across the street as the moving truck pulled up. I saw her crying. I heard him shouting. The neighbors watched from their windows, their expressions a mix of curiosity and veiled pity. I recorded the entire scene on my phone. Not for evidence. That wasn't necessary anymore. This was for me. For the part of my soul that had been forced to swallow humiliation like rusted nails. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had tried to completely erase me. But I wasn't just a chapter they could skip over. I was the one writing the ending. The full amount from the sale landed in my account before sunset. It was more than enough to start a new life, and more than enough to ensure they couldn't. I anonymously donated every single item from their wedding registry. I canceled their honeymoon booking. I left one final voicemail on her mother's phone. Enjoy the motel. You always did have a taste for modest things. I didn't wait for a reply. I never do. There are things in life that break you, and then there are things that rebuild you from the broken pieces. Pain is just truth you haven't processed yet. Once you sort through it, you don't feel the agony anymore. You just remember the lesson. I remember exactly how it felt to hand over those keys and walk away. But now I understand the truth. I never left anything behind that day. I was only baiting the trap. They took everything I appeared to give them, and in return, they lost far more than they could have ever anticipated. I did keep one small memento, however. The front door key. I had it melted down and cast into a single bullet. Not for a gun, not for violence, just for the symbolism. A permanent reminder. You don't win by fighting back directly. You win by letting your enemies believe they have already won until the moment it is far, far too late for them to realize their mistake.